Hello, and welcome to this episode of Musically Cogitating, a podcast about the relevance and importance of living in contemporary music of all kinds, and about how that music impacts all of our lives. I, of course, am your favorite host, Ciyadh Wells. Thank you again for joining us here today on what is a beautiful, beautiful Wednesday, like always. Any important and relevant links will be in the show notes. If you are enjoying this show, please do not forget to subscribe or follow at no cost to you on your podcast player of choice. Today, I am interviewing one of my newest and dearest friends, Leo. Leo is a wonderful person. We had a really great conversation about art and photography and music and the relationship between music and photography. So it was a really, really great conversation. So without any further ado, here's our conversation. So thanks, Leo, for coming on the Musically Cogitating podcast. Before we kind of chat about all the things, I was wondering if you could give the listeners an introduction to who you are, what you do, your connection to music, all that good stuff.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, by the way. It's fun to be here. My name is Leo Mascaro. I'm based in New York City, but I'm originally from Brazil. I've been in New York for about almost 8 years now. And I've been a freelance photographer for the past 10 years or so, kind of specialize in music photography and a few other things. Haven't done much photography though for the past year because of pandemic. So I don't know if I'm still consider myself that. Got into the whole productivity, self-improvement cycle recently, and I just launched a month ago, or 5 weeks ago actually to be precise, a weekly newsletter, which is called Shuffle Sundays, and it's a weekly curated list of content that I've been consuming, mostly related to arts and culture, like recommendations of music, movies, video games, and stuff. Yeah, so I'm kind of photographer / content curator right now, and trying to figure out where that's gonna lead me in the future.
I love that you called yourself a content curator, because I think so many people do that. And they do it well, but they call themselves like content creators as well. And sometimes I'm looking at the things that they've created, and I'm wondering, like, where is the originality in your creation? And not that there's nothing original about bringing things together, but I love this idea of what a lot of people do is curation, and I think it's a little genuine. It's really genuine to be like, oh, I curate this thing.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it's been mostly like I'm kind of creating my own experience with this newsletter, and I don't know if it's, I don't know if I can call myself a curator, because I don't know. I don't know the school for that, but maybe I don't know. Again, I'm just creating my experience, and I'm just from the beginning trying to convince myself that that's what I am. I think it's also, you mentioned the content creation. I think that's been so attached to social media also, like with Instagram, or everyone on social media is a creator or an influencer or something,
right?
Whatever that means.
Yeah, exactly. I wondered if you could, I know about Shuffle Sundays, but could you tell us the inspiration behind that? And I also want to know the process, because this issue that came out today, it's January 31st, and you released them on Sundays. There were a lot of links, and there was a lot of stuff in there, and I want to know how much of that you maybe consumed in the past week versus, whenever you send it out.
That's a good question, actually. I've been thinking about that myself too. How much should it be? I don't want it to create a pressure that, I mean, it's a weekly thing, and in my mind, it should be things that I just consumed the past week. But I think it's slowly already becoming something else that I can get into in a minute. Just going back, in terms of inspiration, I've always, even before photography, I went to school for graphic design. Not that there's any relation with that, but I used to have a blog maybe more than 10 years ago, I don't know, or around 10 years ago, back in Brazil. It was in Portuguese. And it was a blog that I was just sharing things that I was consuming, basically writing. I was a lot more into film back then. I thought I was going to be in the film industry somehow. So I was writing reviews about the movies I was watching and the albums that I was listening to and all that kind of thing. I was sharing much more and much more often as well. When I moved to New York and I was focusing more on people that I was meeting here and doing content in English versus in Portuguese, I kind of dropped the whole idea of having a blog, and I wasn't comfortable writing in English, and I also didn't want to keep up writing in Portuguese because I was trying to find my audience here. So that was kind of put in the back burner for a long time. And more recently, I mean, a few years ago, I started following people like Costin Cleon, which we talked about it before outside of this podcast. And he has a newsletter, again, where he curates links, and it's a mix of things that he puts out there on his blog and other things that he's collecting. And other people have been doing that as well. In parallel to that, I do have my website as a photographer that's been active for, I don't know, 7, 8 years now. And I have a blog within the website, which I was never sure what to do with it. Like, am I just sharing more of my work? Am I going to be writing articles on photography? So that was it was never constantly updated, and I never really understood what I was doing with that. And at the same time, I used to have a newsletter until last year that it was mainly updates. That newsletter where we all collected email addresses from people that we know, clients or coworkers or friends, and all of a sudden you start sending email to everybody, even though you shouldn't. But because it's mainly an update, you just do it anyway, and you hope that nobody was gonna unsubscribe.
Right.
Yeah. So I was doing that for a few years, but very occasionally. It was more like, hey, this is the work I've done recently, and if you're looking for a photographer, that kind of thing. So last year, because of the pandemic and I was out of work, basically, I started put more energy into my website/blog and also the newsletter. So I came back to sending the newsletter, and I created a schedule that I think it was every other week, so twice a month. And I switched from updates on my career to more like inspirational stuff. And I was trying to do the whole update my blog and then share the links on the newsletter. So it was almost like an inspirational story and then a few links in the bottom. But deep inside my mind, I was like, I really want to do a newsletter that is just a curation. I don't want to have to produce anything, or I don't want to be having to keep updating people. I really want to do the curating things. But I don't know if it's probably imposter syndrome or something. I didn't think that people would be interested in.
Sure.
Yeah. So I said, I'm going to do this on my blog and then just replicate it. Not replicate, but just then share the blog post in the newsletter. So Shuffle Sundays actually started in my blog, inside my website. Every Sunday I was then posting this. It was actually a much simpler form. It was really like a 1 or 2 sentences and the links. But I did it for a bunch of weeks in a row, and I was really enjoying it. much more than the actual newsletter that I would send every 2 weeks. And this is getting super long story, but
No, it's great. It's great.
yeah. So at the end of the last year, I joined Ness Labs, this incredible community where I met you also, and I was taking this course there that it was called From Collector to Creator, and it was mainly for people who were wanting to put original content out there, either blog or a newsletter or a book. Uh, Even though it wasn't my focus, I wanted to curate more than create, but I joined the course anyway, and that was really the not only the kickstarter, but it was the big inspiration that I needed to really put myself out there and say, and really own it and say, this is what I want to do. I don't want to keep doing this other thing. So going back to the whole not having people's permissions, I decided to create a new Shuffle Sundays as a newsletter from the scratch, detached from the other newsletter altogether. So what I did, I sent a last issue from my personal newsletter at the end of the year saying, starting January 1st or 3rd, I think was the first Sunday, I'm going to have this new newsletter coming out. And if you want to join if you want to receive the new newsletter, please subscribe to this link or reply to this email letting me know, because this is going to be fresh. I'm not going to include you if you don't want to be included. So that's pretty much how it started. So it's been 5 weeks today. I just sent the 5th issue. And you're just going to your second question about the process. I think it's a mix. I mean, it's also, the whole idea also started as I want to start consuming more content myself.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So yeah, that was one of the things that triggered, because I felt like especially last year, like I was wasting so much time and not really even consuming things for fun that I wanted. Like I was home and not even watching the movies that I wanted to watch or playing the video games anywhere. And so this whole idea is also like every Sunday I have to send this list of interesting things. And if I need to have somewhere that I can choose things to send to people. Not that I'm forcing myself to watch or to listen to, but I want to have enough content. But I think what's becoming is, so every time now that I consume something that I possibly wanna share in the future, I have this database in Notion. We can talk about that later if you want, where I'm just collecting these ideas of content that I may want to share or not in the future. And what's happening now is normally this is kind of organic, and I'm still trying to understand the process. But I think what's happening is normally there's going to be one thing that really catches my attention on that week that I'm gonna, and that's gonna be the first link, like the first content on my newsletter, and then I'm trying to kind of tie a couple other things around that same theme. So those other things they may not be that recent. They may be sitting on my database, and I may pull out things because they relate to this weekly thing that I'm writing about or not. So it's not, even though it's called Shuffle, I don't want it to be that random, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I wanted to at least a few of the things. It doesn't have to be all the content, but at least a few of them I'm trying to tie together in one either theme or idea, a little bit more general. So it's normal, like if I may watch one movie that I'm really loving, and then I go back to my database and say, what else can I catch from here that I already consumed, and it might fit this week's issue. So it's been an interesting process, and certainly nothing I wasn't really expecting that would happen this way, but that's what's been going on.
Yeah. Do you feel like now that you're on this, I'll call it a journey to consume more things, do you find yourself consuming things thinking about how you'll turn this into content later? Like, does it take away from enjoying the album that you've been listening to, the movie you've been watching?
I think yes and no. I was in a walk this morning and I was listening to this album that came out, this past Friday, and I was really looking forward to listening to it. But I did notice, like, I think now I'm not forcing myself, but maybe I'm forcing myself to having to enjoy as much so I can share later.
Right, right.
So I've been in this kind of dilemma, like, am I really enjoying this, or am I just using it as an excuse so I can share later? Or I mean, I'm still trying to be genuine for myself and what I truly enjoy. But what's been happening is right now, uh, if I'm watching a movie and like halfway through, I'm already thinking like, this is interesting, and maybe this is gonna turn into a content. I'm almost starting writing the piece in my head. Like, what are the things that I'm gonna be writing about these things? Why is it so interesting? Which is not a bad thing,
Right, right.
but I do think about. I don't want it to become. Like, I don't want it to put an extra layer of pressure of having to turn everything or anything into. At the end of the day, I still want it to be this as, a place where I'm sharing things because I truly enjoy to begin with.
Right, right. I noticed we were talking about this before we started recording, but that you said, and in this week's issue, you shared one of your favorite photographers' work, and I was wondering if you could share about your work as a photographer of music. Like,
Mm-hmm.
you had a career in that, and I find that like really, really interesting. And I'm wondering also too if there's almost like a multitasking that goes on when you're shooting a band. Like, are you listening to the music? Are you watching them? Is it a mix? Are you distracted? Are you focused? Like, that's just so cool to me that you are a photographer and you photograph music. And yeah, I just want to know about that.
Yeah, I think it's a mix of everything that you mentioned. Actually, uh, of course, this may be different for different people, I guess. But for me, so I used to be. I'm gonna say I used to be a musician, which I don't know if it's even true. I don't know. I used to have a band. I used to play drums in high school. Like, I had a high school rock band back then, and I got into drumming. It's funny because I always enjoy music
Hmm.
very, early age, whatever that means. So music was always very present to me, but I never thought about playing any instruments. In Brazil, even though we do have like you do have some music at school, I don't think it's as much as here. That you have
Oh,
like theater and you can join a choir and you can do all of these things, and you have a marching band, and it's much more limited there. But anyway, so I never really thought about picking up an instrument, uh, even not even having a band or anything. But I remember having this friend in high school. He used to play the guitar. He was learning to play the electric guitar, and he was so excited. He said we should have a band. I don't know. I would love to join to just I don't know, get together with some people and have this start a band. And there was another guy in our classroom who played the bass, and someone else who, I don't know if he was another guitar player or something. Anyway, but there was a lot of people and nobody was a drummer. And I remember he turned to me and said, "You should be the drummer."
I feel like that happens a lot.
Really? Okay. I
Yeah,
didn't.
yeah. It's like
Yeah.
it's kind of like almost a meme. Like, everyone plays a guitar, but no one plays drums, and then just like the drummer, suddenly someone just ends up being the drummer.
And okay, that's funny. I didn't know that. It makes sense. So, and I said, "All right, I'll be the drummer." Like, I have no idea what I was up to. And I remember talking to my dad, and of course, I think he said, I mean, he thought probably that was crazy or that I wasn't serious. So he said something like, "Okay, uh, sign up for lessons, and if after a few months you really enjoy, we can talk about maybe getting a drum kit or something." And so I know that he didn't think I was serious enough. Anyways, I did find a school nearby. I signed up for the classes, and I completely fell in love with drums, like in a way where I don't know, like this. I don't remember being interested before.
Hmm.
So I don't know, we had the band for a couple of years. I never got a drum kit from my dad. Not surprised by that, but I never owned one. We used to use someone else's drum kit or studio or something. So we had the band until last year until the end of high school, basically, and then we each went on our own separate journeys. And I had to stop. Not that I had to stop playing, but I mean, I didn't have the same goal on being on a band, so I didn't play for a long time. At the same time, I was going to concerts a lot. Like I used to go to a lot of concerts at some point, like almost once a week or something, twice a week. All different bands, local or also international bands traveling to Brazil. And I remember coming back home from these concerts, and one of the first things that I was doing it maybe next day was I wanted to look for pictures of those concerts just because I wanted to save on my computer and have memories of the show. This is before everybody had iPhones and everything, by the way. That's why. So I didn't have a memory. I didn't bring anything to register. So I wanted to, and then I became fascinated with music photography back then, just by looking at these photographs. But at the same time, I was looking at the photographs and I had no idea that someone was actually being paid to do that. I thought it was just someone that happened to have a camera. And that stuck with me. Few years later, I think it was 2010, maybe 10 years ago, 11 years ago, I came to New York for the first time, kind of on not a sabbatical, but anyway, I finished a contract job and I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. Came to New York for a few months. I was learning, kind of improving my English and trying to figure out what to do. Then I bought my first DSLR camera here. I was already interested in photography, by the way, but nowhere near to do it as a living. It was just like, maybe one day I would like to have a decent camera and learn more. So I got here, bought my camera like on the first day in New York, and I was photographing for the 3 months that I stayed here. And I was attending concerts here from bands that I wanted to see live, and without having no idea how to I was just basically I wasn't trying to bring the camera with me with no permission, but like, well, I will bring the camera and I will see what happens. Like if the venue was okay, I will try to take some shots, or if not, I will just put my camera on the coat check. So I did actually photograph a few things. I remember I went to a music festival in New Jersey, like a lot of bands, whatever. Paramore was headlining back then, and I don't know why, but I was actually able to bring my camera with me, even though it was a DSLR, exchanging lenses and everything. I remember, I don't know what I said to the security, and they let me in. So I kind of photographed that festival. Of course, I didn't have a photo pass. I wasn't super close, but I still have some pictures to this day they're not that bad actually. So fast forward, I went back to Brazil, and I said, that was really fun. Like I'm already going to these concerts. Why don't I just try to bring the camera and see what happens, or find venues that I'm allowed to do that? Of course, back in Brazil, I had to get a job again, whatever. So I started working, and that was put in the back burner. My camera got stolen actually afterwards. So yeah, so I didn't have a camera for a year or so. And then like a year until I was back, I was able to buy a new camera. And I said, I'm going to try this. So I started taking the camera to a few local concerts. And after doing that for another year or so, got to mention that I was fortunate enough I was still living with my parents, and I didn't have to pay my rent or anything. So I was lucky in that way. And I was working as a video editor back then, and wasn't super happy with it. I was thinking about photography a lot already. And I said, you know what? I'm going to quit my job, and I'm going to try to be a photographer like for a year and see what happens. Like what else? I have nothing to lose, and I'm enjoying this. I didn't think it was great, but I said, I think I'm good enough that if I keep pushing this, I might get somewhere. I gotta say also that I was already kind of planning my way back to New York, even though I was in Brazil.
Of
But I
course,
was,
yeah.
yeah, in the back of my mind, I was like, at some point, I want to go back to New York. I want to see what's gonna happen there. Uh, so I did the whole photographing small local bands there for a year or two until I found the opportunity to come back to New York. This was 2013, and I came back. I took a class uh, at SVA here in New York for people who know the School of Visual Arts, and it was a class. I think it was a 2 month class on theater, stage photography, performing arts photography. And even though I already knew how to do that, I was kind of looking forward to just connecting with other people and learning a bit more and learn about the market, hopefully. And I ended up staying in New York through different circumstances. And until I realized that, like, I was making connections, photographing for blogs, and kind of the whole photographing for free a lot. That's what you do in the beginning. Trying to go to the big name concerts in New York and fighting your way through the photo pit with 10 other people photographing for everybody was photographing for free, basically.
Right.
Probably. But then at some point I said, I gotta find a way to get some money out of this. Otherwise, what's the point? Like, I was enjoying a lot, but I wanted to be my profession. So I found all these small clubs in New York that had concerts every night. Like, there's a venue. I mean, now everything's closed, but there's a venue in New York for independent musicians, and they're open. They used to be open every night, and they will have like 10 different artists playing every night. It was ridiculous. So I started attending these shows, and I started making connections there, and I actually realized that those people were actually willing to pay money to have their photos taken because they need it. And most artists also, they have other jobs, so I mean they can afford. And that was my journey, actually, photographing mostly up and coming independent musicians for, I don't know, almost 7 years until the pandemic started.
Okay.
Yeah, but to answer, this is another super long answer, and I didn't answer what you asked me, which was how much I enjoy or how much I'm distracted. I think it's everything. I love music. Fortunately enough, most of the people that I photographed, that I was paid to photograph, these artists, I ended up enjoying their music a lot. So it was very, very rarely like I was photographing something that I didn't enjoy. So most of the time, even when I didn't know them beforehand, I was still enjoying. Music was always great. And because it's like, if you're doing video, I had friends doing video at these concerts. You have to be like all the time really focused at what you're doing, like holding the camera. You don't want to miss anything. But with photography, especially because I was photographing on the same venues, I already knew like the best angles, the lighting, even the structure of the people on stage didn't change that much. So it was very easy for me to kind of, in 10 minutes, I kind of already had the main standard shots that they're gonna want. And then the rest of the show was like me wandering around, enjoying the music and looking for other interesting angles or opportunities. So I don't think I would have done this for so long if I wasn't enjoying it at the same time. I think that's the answer. So I did enjoy it a lot at the same time.
I have this is like a random question. Have you ever been working a show, photographing, and have you ever noticed someone on stage kind of like posing to you or like looking for you in the like? Do musicians ever do that?
I don't know. I don't know. That's a question. I mean, if I know you're gonna ask me that, I probably could look into my archives and see if I could remember that. But I don't think nothing really comes to my mind.
Okay.
I think also, I mean, again, because I was photographing mostly up and coming new artists, I think most of them really didn't care, or like you notice that there's not even a whole preparation into, like, I mean, some bands will have cool outfits or something. They'll put a little more thought into the whole show. But most of them were like they just like showing up and playing their music. And I mean, I think all, I mean, once, I mean, if a lot of the artists I ended up photographing more than once. So once they got to know me and they knew I was going to be there again, maybe they would uh, be a little more conscious. But that's, I can't remember a specific situation where that really happened. I mean, I'll get occasional looking at the camera but I'm also, it's also a situation where even though I'm hired, I'm there because the band hired me and they know I'm going to be there and they need good photos. I always try to be as invisible as possible when I'm doing. I don't want to distract the band, or I never use flash or anything. So I'm really just. I'm not just someone attending with a camera, but at the same time, I want to blend in, and my I always feel more comfortable if I get a shot where that person had no idea that I was actually in that corner or right in front of them, or otherwise I'll be probably taken away from other people enjoying as well.
Sure, sure. Do you have like a dream musician that you would love to shoot one day?
Uh,
Taylor Swift
probably
or any just anyone.
probably a lot. I mean, that's the thing, because don't get me wrong. I mean, I love a lot of people that I work with, and they're all incredible artists. But because I spend so much time focused on the small clubs and up and coming musicians, I really didn't photograph a lot of the big names. I did a little bit in the beginning, like I photographed Imagine Dragons.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, and it was like the first tour, like big tour. It's before they really got huge. Not for them, by the way. This is when I was photographing for blogs without making
Oh,
any money. Yeah, not directly for. I wish it was for the band, but it wasn't. Uh, so I mean, there's a lot of bands that I enjoy that I never photographed and I would love to. One thing, I grew up. I used to love Blink 182. That was one of my bands in the teenage time. I mean, I actually still listen to them. Uh, and because of the drums also, I love Travis Barker, their drummer. So I mean, that's one I can think. Not only the band itself, but I love maybe to photograph him as a musician, as a drummer. I used to love Incubus also. This would be another band that I loved. I love to photograph them. I used to really be into Linkin Park. Unfortunately, Chester, the singer, died a couple of years ago, maybe even more. Another band that I would love to. I mean, probably, I guess I'm probably only thinking about bands that I grew up listening to. It would be cool to, after all this time, to photograph them. I also used to dream about going on tour as their photographer and kind of capturing every show every night, and then the whole behind the scenes will be cool.
Do you feel like a photographer's job in the sense of capturing musical events, do you feel like it's more of for promotional purposes or for archival, for to remember, like what do you as a photographer find the value in, but what do you think musicians find the value in having photos of like every night on a tour, for instance?
I think it's a little bit of everything. I think the tour, I mean, these big bands having someone on the tour, I think it's both for archival. I don't think I wouldn't say it's for promotional purposes, because they also have their like portraits, whatever, more standard things that they might use on a poster or on a flyer. But I think having those photos every night is also, I mean, nowadays it's probably good for social media, because you're always like, so that the person who's seeing the show tomorrow night, they can have an idea of what happened the night before in a different city. Or so that's the whole engagement with the fans that are going to be watching. But in terms of the bands that I photographed, I mean, again, the smaller bands, a lot of them used my photos, even though it was live, like concert photo, for promotional stuff. They'll make posters out of it and promote their next shows. Some of them even use for like a single cover or album cover on Spotify or something. But normally when it's promotional purposes, it's normally like a studio setup,
Right.
and it's a more portrait type of thing.
Right. Right. So, are you still in love with photography? Because I feel like when we met
I hate that
um,
question.
a little a little while a little while ago, you were you didn't talk about photography so passionately,
Yeah.
and I know it's
So
been almost a year since you shot a show. It'll more than likely be a little while. So
yeah. Uh, I think, I mean, to answer the question, probably I'm probably not as in love as I used to be. But what happened is actually even before COVID, like I remember 2019 was a year where I guess I never really enjoyed being a freelancer.
okay,
That's one thing. Like I grew up, I really love the whole being a photographer. I think I mean, probably 90% of artists goes through this. Like I had a passion for the art. I love being a photographer. I love being out there shooting, but I never really enjoyed the whole before and after. Like even the before part, like having to be in touch with the client and having to negotiate and how much it's gonna be, when it's gonna be. Are you bailing on me? I mean,
right, yeah,
how many times I got hired, quote unquote, and then they just ghost me and it never happens. Or so I never really. It was just too many frustrations, too much anxiety, and then the whole afterwards. What if they don't like it? What happens? When's the next one? Then you start raising your price, and all of a sudden you have less clients. I don't know. I never again. Then the whole marketing, putting yourself out there, promoting Instagram, website, everything. Uh, so I probably got around 2019. I was getting burned out
mm,
from the whole freelance life, and it was a matter of, do I want to keep pushing myself and take the chance of start hating photography altogether and not even want to see a camera in front of me anymore? So my solution, which now it sounds funny because 2020, like I didn't I didn't do anything at all. But my solution back then was, I want to just look for a part-time job doing whatever else I can do, or even a full-time, that takes me away from the freelance life,
mm,
but that gives me enough time off that I can still shoot for occasional clients or people that I already enjoy working with. I don't want to say no to those people. And occasionally, if there's a really good opportunity that comes my way, I can say yes and do it. But I didn't want that to be my daily struggle on having
gotcha.
to rely on always having the next client booked and everything. And I was actually kind of, I started 2020 in that direction. I had a job that was kind of new to me, and I was enjoying, and I wanted to see where things will go. Also, I mean, besides the whole music photography, I shoot a lot. I was shooting a lot for myself, just architectural, landscape stuff in New York City, street photography, and I never really put much energy into those types of photography because they were making money, basically. So it would be cool to all of a sudden have enough time and money to pay attention to those things. But then again, 2020 happened, and now I have no idea. I mean, I'm hoping to at some point go back into being able to enjoy photography as much, but more and more on the hobby side of it. Then I guess that means like without putting that much pressure on having to make it as a photographer.
Right, right. So it's
Maybe
like you love the art, but invoicing is not your passion.
exactly. I guess most people can relate to that, but
Oh yeah, yeah. I think so.
that's exactly what it is.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think there's this glamour around like freelancing, and I mean, I don't do a lot of freelancing, but whenever I'm playing and sometimes or speaking, and people just don't like send you what they said they would send you, and
Hmm.
it's really frustrating
Yeah.
because you know we all have needs, and we live in a society where we need to buy things. And so,
I think it's also, I mean, it's really a blessing and a cursing. Like I say all these things about not enjoying being a freelance, but at the same time, it was kind of fun to have all the freedom to, like, I was working a lot of the weekends, and I mean, ever since I became a freelancer almost 10 years ago, like, I don't know what's a weekend or what's a holiday anymore. Any day can be a work day. But at the same time, a lot of the times I'll be free during the week, and or I could travel sometimes in a week where I probably would have to be stuck in an office if I was working full time. So of course, I mean, there's a lot of good things about it, of course, but there's a lot of stress and anxiety also at the same time when you're not in a good place with yourself or with your business.
sure, sure, sure. So, what's next for you? I mean, you played drums when you were in high school, you were into graphic design, you're a photographer, and now you curate a newsletter.
Mhm.
What's next?
I think, I mean, is that even a question in 2020?
Creatively.
I
I guess
know, yeah. I mean, it's just,
or whatever. Whatever's
yeah.
next.
I don't know. I think that I don't know what's next. I mean, what's right now, what's current is the only goal that I set for me in 2021 was I want to be consistent with this newsletter. I want to send, uh, I don't know how many weeks are going to be in 2021. We normally say 52 weeks in a year. So my goal is to send the 52 issues Sunday after Sunday and kind of see where that's going to take me. Maybe I'll meet more interesting people, and maybe even a job opportunity will come from it. Or I know that recently I actually learned another reason to start in this newsletter is that a lot of companies, they actually hire content curators.
Mm-hmm.
I used to think that curator was only like for a museum or a gallery, but there's a lot of even companies like Spotify or Apple, or they all have
Right,
people.
right. The people
Yeah,
who make the playlists are
yeah, exactly. So I don't know. Maybe I mean that sounds cool. Maybe it's not as cool as it sounds from the outside, but uh, so yeah, I'm just working consistently in this newsletter, and I think the next would be there's nothing specific, but in my mind, the next thing would be how do I translate all my current interests into a job or a career, a new career, or if that makes sense. So I don't have the answer, but I guess that's where my mind is going.
no, I mean that's I think we're all there. I mean, I kind of feel that too. Like I have all these interests and what's next? I have no idea. I'm just gonna keep working on these things
Yeah,
and see where we go.
you mentioned the drumming. I got last October. I bought a keyboard because I wanted to, not because I always wanted to play the keyboard or learn the piano, even though I always enjoy listening to it. I was more into drumming, but I live in New York City in a small apartment. I was like, there's no way I can get a drum kit here. Even an electronic one would be very kind of, it'll make the same noise, but it'll be very disturbing for people around, I think.
Right.
But I wanted, at the same time, I've been wanting for a long time to reconnect with playing music somehow, with no intention of becoming really great or or making music or anything. But who knows? So I bought this keyboard and I've been practicing a little bit every day. Uh, so that's another fun thing that's been happening, and that I'm always keeping myself open to see
I'm
where it's gonna
practicing
take me.
practicing like 5 hours every day.
Oh
I'm
yeah,
just
more like 5 minutes. Well, that can be a whole lot of other episodes talking about daily habits and all the expectations we put on ourselves. But it's been a maybe I want to say 10 to 30 minutes every day. That's been
I thought
my
that's really good. Yeah.
yeah. So it's been fun. It's been a new discovery for me.
That's really cool. So, this podcast is about music. And although, every Sunday you send out a newsletter where you share a music recommendation I was wondering if you could share a special recommendation for this show that'll go in the Spotify playlist.
Can I repeat something that is on the newsletter, or
That's
maybe
fine. Yeah,
something different?
it can be something that's you already shared.
Okay. So I just actually this morning this fifth issue of the newsletter. I'm talking about one of the things I'm talking about is this Brazilian band called Selton. My accent is not going to be very good, but it's Selton. I can share you the links later, and you can put in the descriptions. But anyway, they're originally from Brazil. They're based in Italy for the past few years, and what I really like about them is like their songs are sung in Portuguese, English, Italian, sometimes Spanish. Sometimes you'll see like they'll throw someone's reciting a passage in Portuguese from Portugal, so have like a fifth accent or something, and it's just all over the place, and it's so cool. They also like the genres that they're mixing are so interesting. Like I mean, at the end of the day, it's probably indie rock or pop rock, whatever. It's very accessible and commercial, but they'll throw like some more electronic beats at some point, or it'd be something more samba, more like Brazilian roots, or it's just, I don't know, like those bands that you never know what's gonna be next. Like it's always a good surprise whenever you hear the next song. And they have an album coming out, I think this spring maybe. They've been putting out some singles, and I know them for a little while now. I actually photographed them in Brazil years and years ago. But it's one of those bands, it's one of those artists, like even though you don't listen to them all the time, whenever you come back to them, you're like, oh, this is so good. Like, why am I not listening to this more often? So that'll be my recommendation. I'm gonna
check this out. This sounds so cool.
Yeah, I'm really digging them more and more.
Awesome. Well, Leo, thanks for coming on the show. It's been a lot of fun, and I'm sure you'll be back on the show sometime soon, and we'll talk about productivity and habits in a more in-depth way next time, I'm sure.
Sounds more serious also, but thank you so much for having me. This has been a lot of fun.
Awesome. So that was our conversation. I hope that you enjoyed it. Of course, a link to Leo's really, really awesome newsletter, Shuffle Sundays, is in the show notes, and along with a few other things that we kind of mentioned throughout the show, in addition to the recommendation of the week, the music recommendation of the week, the Spotify playlist is linked below. Do not forget to follow the podcast on social media and the website, and the Musically Cogitating newsletter will have some special announcements and bonus material for this upcoming one, which will be out just a few days after this episode. So please use the link in the show notes to subscribe, and you will get something special in your inbox in the next few days. The Discord channel is live. It is active. It's some great conversation. So please head over there and you can chat with us about this episode or any of the other episodes of the show so far. Again, if you're listening to this on Apple Podcasts, please give us a like, rating, and review, as it helps for me to make the show better. And you can always support by buying a book or a coffee using the Buy Me a Coffee or Support the Show link in the show notes. That is all that I have for you today. Of course, I will be back in 2 weeks with another episode of the Musically Cogitating podcast. Until then.